Eagles fans, this is Chris Franklin from NJ Advanced Media, and welcome to the No-Huddle Show podcast, the show where we discuss all things related to the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, before we begin, I want to remind you that you can read all of our content on NJ.com/Eagles, and make sure to bookmark that to get the latest Eagles news and analysis. Today, I'm once again joined by my No-Huddle Show co-host, Bob Brookover and Cayden Steele. We can see how this show's going to go already. It's going to be fun. We officially have a roster, though, and we know that the Eagles have their 53-man roster in place, and they also signed 14 players to their practice squad so far. We'll get into that a little bit later, but first off, let's talk to Bob and Cayden. Guys, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Countdown is on. What are we, 9 days away? Is it 10 days? I don't know how to count the difference between days. But next Friday they're gonna play a game. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
How about you, Cayden? How you doing, man?
Yeah, feeling the same way as Bob. Preseason, I don't know if you want to call it fun in training camp. It was a good time to kind of see how this how this team looked just coming in, and it was good to see the practices and be able to be out there at NovaCare and kind of get a feel for things. But now everything's about to start, and locker room will be open coming up soon, and we'll be able to talk to more players and get find even better stories. So I'm excited just for more access and just for the real games to begin. So it's gonna be a good time.
Yeah, it is. It'll be a real football will be here. I mean, the last game we saw was the preseason finale where the Eagles got drubbed by the Minnesota Vikings backups. They beat the Eagles backups 26-3. And that was the last showing for some of these guys. And we had to wait around for the roster to come around. And 4 p.m. Tuesday, we finally did know. We got the 53-man roster. And we also got today at noon, nobody was claimed off for waivers. And we got to see the guys coming back on the practice squad. But we're going to start with our opening drive question here. And I'll start with Bob and then go to you, Cayden. Bob, what's been your biggest takeaway from yesterday's cuts?
Giants have one heck of a team. No, I'm sorry. I'm back from my sabbatical on the Giants. I was following Giants cuts all day. And speak for yourself, the last preseason game was the Vikings versus the Eagles. The last preseason game was the Jets versus the Giants. But anyway,
excuse me.
Out of the left corner of my eye, I've been keeping attention to the Eagles, and now I'm back. And how people must be so excited. Try to control yourself. Hold down the applause. After looking at the Eagles' initial roster, and I still feel this way after seeing the practice squad additions, was my immediate thought was this roster is top heavy with defensive players, 28 on that side of the ball, only 22 on offense. That has to change, doesn't it? I wrote a little bit about this morning. They put Nick Cates on the practice squad. According to Adam Schefter, he's been told he's going to be on the active roster opening night in Brazil. So that will give them 10 offensive linemen, but they seem light there too, with not only 9 on the 53-man. But that was my immediate takeaway, that the way they set up this practice squad is going to have to kind of make sure they're not so thin on that side of the ball, but because right now they are lacking depth on the offensive side of the football. Only 2 tight ends. They did bring back Jack Stoll, and Alberto is still in the mix. But now we're talking about Dallas Goedert wasn't on the practice field today, correct? You guys were there. Yeah. So there are concerns on that side of the ball depth-wise. I think that those would be my immediate reactions.
And then, Cayden, what do you think? What has been your biggest takeaways from all the moves they made to get the roster down to 53 players?
Yeah, I think the one thing is when it comes to these decisions, especially on the defensive side, Vic Fangio has some say. Remember in training camp, or I believe it was in training camp, him mentioning that he wouldn't feel comfortable unless he got 6 or 7 guys in the defensive tackle room. They kept 6. They obviously went defensive heavy, and then in the secondary, 11 defensive backs. We saw this team get really spurned. This secondary wasn't great last year in terms of just how they played, but just injuries piled up last season. With Reed Blankenship got banged up a few times, and just Max got hurt. They were just cycling guys in and out, and different guys had to play in the nickel. Eli Ricks had to play in the nickel. Now they got 11 guys, so they're a lot more deep there. At least it looks like, it could be a unit that could maybe sustain some injuries if they happen. You have guys with experience who are going to be backups like Maddox and Bradberry, and maybe Bradberry's overall the biggest takeaway for me. Just looking at any singular thing is just the fact that they didn't get rid of him, and how I talked about yesterday, just whether you want to believe him or not, maybe if they could have traded him, they would have done it. But the fact that they believe that, having a guy with his veteran presence is important. Even on the practice squad, bringing Cayden Steele back, which is interesting for the fact that he has to practice, but they added another DB on the practice squad as well. Still have a few slots left. Maybe they bring back Josh Jobe. They're deeper in the secondary, and they seem like they wanted to keep as many guys as possible. And 6 defensive tackles, screams like, Vicks has, some say on the personnel, and to help Thomas Booker get on the roster. So those are the ones. I guess the other one I thought offensively, 9 offensive linemen. Bob already kind of mentioned it, bringing back Nick Gates, but be a little worried about this depth. I think it's a little weak and a little light. They obviously really like Trevor Keegan. They kept him on the roster. They didn't keep Dylan McMahon around, but you're going to have to Fred Johnson and Tyler Steen. Those are the guys you're really going to have to rely on as your top interior guys. Because Trevor Keegan and Darian Kennard are pretty unproven. I don't think his depth is as strong as it was last year with guys like Sua Peta and Jack Driscoll, who got released today by the Dolphins.
Okay, got that. And then just to go over some of the other housekeeping rules on top of that. Safety Sidney Brown, he's going to start on the PUP list, a physically unable to perform list, so he won't be starting the season with the Eagles. Also, kind of saw one of these two moves coming on top of that in terms of the IR with the designated to return. That's something new that teams are allowed to do this season. You can put 2 people up there. Albert Okwuegbunam, excuse me if I mispronounced that, a tight end, he's on there along with wide receiver Nia Smith. So you'll have those guys not on there. Now, we talked about previously some of these competitions, and we saw wide receiver and cornerback. We saw Johnny Wilson make it over Paris Campbell. We saw, as previously mentioned, Josh Jobe, Zach McPherson. They were waived, and they kept on a guy like Eli Ricks. So I'll go to you, Cayden, and then to you, Bob, after that. What was the roster move that surprised you the most that the Eagles made yesterday?
Yeah, the one that stuck out to me the most was not keeping Dylan McMahon. And look, it's a 6th-round rookie, so at the end of the day, it's not a big deal, especially for the fact that they got him back on the practice squad and he wasn't claimed by anyone, so you can continue to work with him. But I thought he'd make the roster. They seem to really like him and his athletic, ability. Not the biggest guy in the world. Pretty undersized for the position. That could be a problem in the NFL. But he thought they'd keep him around for a year. They'd have 10 linemen on the roster, which with the depth concerns, I don't think it would be a bad idea to keep one extra guy there. And he was a natural fit as the backup center for Cam Jurgens. But that's the one that caught my attention. They were willing to risk him getting claimed, and he did it, and he had some things going against him. The size being the biggest thing. So now he's back, but I didn't think they'd cut any draft picks. So they put Nia Smith on IR with an ankle and a hamstring injury. So he'll spend at least the first 4 weeks not playing as well. But didn't think they'd risk a rookie, and they did it. But he still has a chance now to be back on the team. So they're probably happy with how all things ended out. But I thought it was a little interesting.
Cool. And Bob, what about you? What do you think was one of the biggest surprises?
I'm going to say the same thing because, they hadn't cut a rookie draft pick since Jacoby with a capital C in the middle of his name for no apparent reason, Stevens. I don't know what that C's doing there. It's the weirdest looking name I've ever seen in my life. But anyway, I guess his parents wanted him to be a captain one day. But anyways, I do think the thing about a roster now, and I'm going off the rails a little bit here, but is that the practice squad and the ability to keep veterans on the practice squad has just changed everything in terms of the way things look at guys look at thing. And Howie Roseman referred to that several times, and he obviously did not feel like the roster was complete yesterday with the 53-man initial roster. Still not, because there are 3 guys left, as Cayden pointed out. But it allows them to do what they're doing with Nick Gates. I don't care what you saw from Dylan McMahon in the preseason and in training camp, because you were mostly seeing it against backups, whereas Nick Gates has started 39 games in his career, 29 with the Giants, 10 last year as the center. He started 16 in 2020 for the Giants, all at center. So, I mean, he's become essentially their backup center while being on the practice squad and giving them more time to kind of do whatever they want with the roster, because the practice squad rules are you get 3, you got to be signed after being elevated 3 times. So they can mess with this. The roster is obviously a work in progress, and it remains that throughout the season. Although, at a certain point, the roster is what the roster is after the trade deadline. You can't really finagle too much anymore. But it still is always surprising whenever a team cuts a draft pick, and the Eagles did that with McMahon. That they kept so many guys defensively also surprised me a little bit. But again, it's something they can mess around with the practice squad, and we'll see what they do going forward here.
Now, I'll say this: the thing that surprised me the most is that they kept Tristan McCollum and they kept Thomas Booker, because I thought it was. Normally during each camp, you got the one guy that comes out of nowhere and it stays on the roster, and they do that. Well, this year, and deservedly so, these guys played well in the preseason. You look at Booker, we've had 8 tackles and 1 sack during the 3 preseason games as well, and he looked like he was penetrating. He's got familiarity with the Fangio system, so that surprised me a bit. And you look at the way Tristan McCollum played, especially that final preseason game, and he seemed like he was around the ball a lot. And it was crazy to see, like, when you look at the tackle total, he was among the team leaders in times of that. And normally I'm thinking, okay, are they going to keep that many safeties on the roster? Are they going to keep really 6, 7? And I know Cayden previously mentioned that Evangelo wanted that, and I was kind of shocked to see that they did that, and they were willing to let go a guy like Job and Zach McPherson and what have you, in order to get those guys on there. It kind of shocked me in a way. I'm looking now, like, and this is where you start to go. Now you have your 53 guys. You already know for that Packers game, and we'll get into that next week as before the game has it. You already have one guy that you're bringing up, and Nick Gates, is what Adam Schefter reported. He's going to be elevated for the game, which we'll get to that later. But yeah, you start looking at this. How do you make them inactive? Is McCollum like a focal point of your special teams core? There's so much stuff that's going to be on, and it's going to be interesting to see how they work this game day roster and make sure that they get the most out of these guys that they have on the back end there and to be contributors. Now, speaking of people that were surprises, this may be a surprise to some. James Bradberry, I won't say cornerback, but cornerback turned safety. James Bradberry remains on the roster. He's entering his 3rd season with the team. He's actually due on September 1st a option that's going to be north of $9 million, which is a lot for him, especially for a guy that some people thought he was going to be out. Some people thought he's like, hey, is he going to play corner again? You didn't know what his role was going to be. So, Bob, I'm going to ask you, what do you think James Bradberry's role is going to be this upcoming season?
Well, in my mind, it's going to go one of 2 ways. Let's point out first that C.J. Gardner-Johnson last 3 years played 3 games last year, 12 games in 22 with the Eagles, 12 games in 21 with the Saints. So that means he's missed 5, 10, 24 games in the last 3 seasons. So, now you've got a guy who's an experienced guy, not experienced in playing safety, but experienced at being in a defensive backfield and seeing what he sees in front of him. So that is not necessarily a bad thing to have on your roster. The other thing is, I know they're happy with what Reed Blankenship has done in his 2 years with the team, but he's still a young, unproven player. So I mean, there are scenarios here where they count on James Bradberry a lot more than we expected them to this season. We'll see if that happens. I don't know. What we don't know, Avonte Maddox ran a lot there this preseason too, and training camp. So I don't know who they view more, who they'd have more trust in. Should one of those two starters get hurt? I'm not sure, but I think it might be Bradberry. I don't know. But it's a question that's out there. The other thing that could happen, and I saw this happen last year, and it's a reason that makes you wonder why they did keep Bradberry, because he doesn't have any special teams experience. The Giants did this last year with Sterling Shepard, who had no special teams value whatsoever. It's hard to do, hard to keep, and only veteran guys are going to get that benefit of the doubt. But Sterling Shepard essentially played no role for the Giants last year. Could that happen with James Bradberry? I think if there's a certain point where they say, hey, you know what, we don't see the value in having him here anymore, that he could be gone. But like I said, I could also see a scenario where given CJ Gardner-Johnson's injury history and what we still don't know entirely who Reed Blankenship is, I can see a scenario where we see more of James Bradberry than we expect.
Nice. Now we're going to go over to the practice squad now. We mentioned some of the moves that were made earlier. 14 players were added, and some of those notable names included linebacker Oren Burks, tight ends E.J. Jenkins, Jack Stoll, who's returning from his stint with the Giants. And we mentioned Gates earlier, and as previously mentioned, that Gates is going to be up for that first game, which could potentially show a sign for what's happening with Tyler Steen and his potential availability, should he be, if he's not ready to return from that ankle. Cayden, the Eagles had a chance to claim someone off of waivers or add them to the practice squad, and they still may have as many as 3 spots open on that practice squad too if they keep domestic players, and if additional one if they add an international player. Is there a player who was waived that you think the Eagles should have claimed or attempted to add to their practice squad?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because you don't want to be that team that claims every single player like the Carolina Panthers did on Wednesday. You claim 4 corners and 2 linebackers. So in all reality, it's probably fine that they didn't claim or add anyone to the 53. I mean, I'm a little surprised they didn't make a move. The one move I thought they would do was add Stoll to the 53, but he's heading to the practice squad anyway. So, I mean, eventually he'll probably work his way there. So, a little surprised they didn't make a move on the 53 via claim or via signing. But, I mean, it's not a big deal. Like I said, you don't want to be Carolina. You don't want to be New England. You're not in a position to necessarily claim a bunch of players. But if they, I guess, made one claim or took a shot on a guy at a position, that position, you could make an argument maybe for another offensive lineman, a guy with center, guard flexibility. You could make an argument that maybe it could have been a tight end with a little more upside, and then a guy like Stoll, if you wanted to put a guy actually on the 53. But the one position that I'm more worried about than I think anticipated, even though I still believe in the top guys at the top of Bryce Huff and Joshua, is the edge rusher depth. And if there was a young guy out there that you wanted to take a swing on to add to that rotation, I would have done it. And there wasn't a lot of options out there. I was scouring through the waiver, or all the guys who got waived and released yesterday. I mean, the veterans were like the Carl Lawsons of the world and stuff like that. Guys you just probably don't have a bunch left in the tank. But though the guy that caught my attention a little bit, and he got claimed actually today by the Bengals, is KJ Henry, the 5th-round pick from the Commanders last year. He got waived by the Commanders, which is probably not the best sign in the world, but at the same time, I mean, it seems like the Commanders were they wanted a fresh start from the older regime. They got rid of Dotson. They waived their 3rd-round pick last year, Ricky Stromberg. They waived Braden Daniels, their 4th-round pick. It just seems that they were getting rid of guys who they didn't really value, or just a new regime kind of cleaning house. So KJ Henry led the league in 9 hurries this year in preseason. It is preseason game, so we had to take it with some account. But a guy that has some upside, was a pretty good college player at Clemson. And you look at the back end, although Patrick Johnson had a really good preseason, I don't think that would have stopped you from adding another guy. Like, I'm not sure if Nolan Smith is ready to contribute. I mean, he played all the way pretty deep into that, last preseason game. And it's not to say that he can't be good, but just nothing that we've seen so far that says that Nolan Smith's ready to be a huge time contributor. Brandon Graham's been a good player throughout his career, but being realistic, he's entering year 15 and he's not going to play a ton of snaps. Jalex Hunt, although it's probably farther ahead than we thought, he's not ready either. So, and then you have, it surprises me that they didn't take a chance on a young guy to just help boost that pass rush that is either just ineffective probably this year or just unproven. And then at least when it comes to the rotation, but then they didn't even add like Julian Okora back yet to the practice squad or Terrell Lewis yet. They have no edge rushers on the 14 guys they've signed. They have no guy who could be elevated on game days, which kind of shocks me. So I would have took a shot on a guy like KJ Henry. Maybe there's another guy out there that you could have put on the practice squad at least. Right now, it seems a little risky just to rely on Nolan Smith and just the guys they currently have in this rotation. It just doesn't seem like the best bet.
For me, I was like a guy I like, but he was waived by the Minnesota Vikings, but they re-signed them back to their practice squad. It was Andre Carter II. And I remember seeing him coming out of Army last year and during the combine process and just watching watching a few games, including that Army-Navy game, which, yeah, it's always fun to watch. But anywho, look at the way a 6'6" guy, very athletic, who could play in space. He was an undrafted free agent, and he didn't flash as much as the Vikings and I think everybody thought he would during his rookie season. But he's a guy that I looked at as a potential guy that could be on that practice squad. You could have let Jeremiah Washburn play with him and help him refine some of his tools and let him develop and see what would happen. And like you mentioned, that when it comes to that depth on the outside, yeah, I probably would have done it. Now, if he went through waivers, so you could have signed him eventually, but I look at that. I think it'll be a little bit better than the Jarius Robinson experiment that the Eagles had, bringing him when they claimed him off waivers early in the 2022 season. I thought he would be Carter would be a better guy for that. So I wish he was there, but such is life, and we can't. In the worst of storms, we can't always get what we want. So yeah, we have that. Now it's time for a new segment on the No-Huddle Show, and it's called the Run Pass Option. Now, instead of having these guys actually go on the field and working with running backs and wide receivers to run the actual RPOs, they'll be hearing a statement that I'll read to them. And if the statement is something that they like, they'll run with it and give a reason why. If a statement is something that they think is not true or is going to happen, they'll pass it along and they'll also give a reason why. So for the first time, here we go. Bob, I'm going to give you a statement, read this first statement, then go to Cayden. We'll go back and forth in terms of that. Bob, run or pass? Quinyon Mitchell will be the starting outside cornerback when the regular season begins.
Run, and because he can run, And Vic Fangio is of the mindset, and I'm convinced of this. He don't care about age. He cares about who he thinks is the best player, and it's been pretty clear through training camp in the preseason that he's pretty high on Quinyon Mitchell. I don't think especially an old school guy who's been around as long as him, I don't think I've heard many old school coaches be as complimentary about a rookie as Vic Fangio has been about Quinyon Mitchell. And he's basically said, we're going to have to do what we think is best for this defense. And right now, what's best for this defense is Quinyon Mitchell being the starting outside cornerback, and as he did through much of the preseason and as we saw in training camp practices, and then moving inside in nickel situations, and either Isaiah Rodgers or Kelee Ringo playing on the outside. I think it's more likely to be Isaiah Rodgers, but I could be wrong. It could end up being Kelee Ringo. I keep pronouncing his name wrong, I know. But I think Quinyon is the starter when they line up for the first snap of the season next Friday night. I really do.
Cayden, you're running or you're passing?
I'm running with that as well. You look at Quinn and Mitchell, and Bob made the best point. Like Vic already talked about it in his opening press conference in training camp about the age thing. Like he doesn't care. And two, he's the second best corner on this roster, and that's nothing against Isaiah Rodgers or Keely Ringo. And like those guys have played in the NFL before, and Quinnen has it, but you could tell when a player, a guy who's going to be really good, has something to him, and the way that he played mainly in practice, not backing down to Devontae Smith or A.J. Brown, especially in those one-on-ones and in the 11-on-11s. I mean, there was a few times they got Quinnen, pretty bad, but for the most part, even when he was getting beat, it was tight, sticky coverage. He was right on their hip. Like, he looks like he belongs in the NFL. The jump from the MAC, playing at Toledo from the NFL doesn't seem like it's a issue at all for him. That this is a guy that could have played in the Power 5, and he was loyal to Toledo, so he didn't take all the money and the NIL money that every other player in college football has been. He stuck there for another year, and he probably would have thrived at a school like Alabama if he ended up going there like Nick Saban wanted him to. So he's looked like a really good player, not only just against the pass in practice, but I mean, he comes down, and the few times, and maybe it's not something we notice with corners as much or you don't pay attention to as much, but just in run fits, especially that he's been in the nickel so much, and he's pretty solid in that area. You saw the pass break up against the Ravens. He almost had a pick. He seems instinctual. He's fast. I think he plays with a good physicality. Like, he's ready to play in the league. And of course, he's going to get beat in week 1 and week 2. I mean, he's going to go against some really good wide receivers in Green Bay. They have a lot of different guys, and he's going to go through his ups and downs. So I'm not going to go out and say he's going to be perfect or he's going to be an all-pro this year. I don't want to put too high of expectations, but he has the mindset, if he does get beat, to bounce back, because we've seen it already happen in practice against Devontae and AJ. So he's been a really good find for the Eagles, and if albeit he stays healthy, the Eagles might have like a cornerstone on their defense for the next 4 or 5 years coming forward.
All right, nice. So now we're going to reverse the order now. Running back Saquon Barkley will finish with more yards from scrimmage than Atlanta Falcons running back Bijan Robinson and not Cordell Patterson. Cayden, what's going on with you? What do you think?
Yeah, I'll go with I'm gonna pass on that one. The reason that I'm gonna pass on that, it's nothing to do with Saquon Barkley necessarily. I think he's gonna have a big season as well in Philadelphia, be used in multiple different ways as coming out the backfield, catching some more passes, more than the typical Eagles fans used to a running back catching the ball, and I think he's going to be a big part of the run game. But there's a lot of different weapons the Eagles have to get the ball to when it comes to just scrimmage yards in general. Don't think Saquon will be at the top. I mean, you got AJ, they're going to Devontae, Jahan Dotson, Goddard. They're going to throw the ball a ton. I think morally the team is going to be more of an air attack type team. I do think Saquon will be heavily involved, but not the way Atlanta will be. You look at the Falcons, and yes, they have Drake London and Kyle Pitts, but other than that, they're really thin at wide receiver. Unless you're a big Darnell Mooney fan, you lost Rondell Moore during training camp. You got a bunch of other guys in that wide receiver room, like Ray McLeod and guys like that. So I don't think they're going to necessarily be spreading the ball as much. I do think they'll pass, but I think they'll rely more on Bijan to be a big part of their offense than the Eagles will rely on Saquon. You look at the Rams last year; they're 12th in the league in rush attempts. Ran on 41% of their plays. I could see that going up even more with a guy like Bijan Robinson and Zach Robinson, the former Rams OC, is the guy there in Atlanta now. So, I mean, if they were willing to do that with Kyren Williams, he was there, I think they'll be willing to do that with Bijan just a little bit more, maybe around like 45, 50%. And I'm not sure if I see the Eagles necessarily getting there. So I think Bijan will get more of an opportunity to be the vocal point of that offense versus like Saquon, where I think he's kind of like that third vocal point behind AJ and Devontae.
Bob, what are you doing, running or passing?
I'm going to run reluctantly because Cayden has made some excellent points here. The Falcons need Bijan Robinson to really be a huge part of their offense for all the reasons he mentioned. But I'm going to run because I'm the guy who wrote way back when Saquon was still a Giant, that this guy could be their Christian McCaffrey. And I still believe that's true. And this is a passing league. It's going to open up. He's going to have chances to run, I think, in terms of having holes that he's never seen before because he's running behind a good offensive line. And he's just going to be a rejuvenated player with this team and get opportunities to do things that he never had to do with the Giants since his rookie year. He was really good in 2022. He was great. He was a Hall of Fame trajectory player as a rookie. I just think Saquon is ready for a breakout year, and that I really believe that Howie Roseman, when he made this move, visions of Christian McCaffrey went through his head before he signed him, because you don't sign a guy for the kind of money, a running back for that kind of money, if you don't have visions of grandeur. And I just think it's going to be a special season for Saquon Barkley. I've been feeling that way since they signed him, and I'm not going to go back on it now. But I do admit that Cayden made some good points, as much as that pains me.
Oh, jeez. Okay, well, on that note, we'll now go to the 2-minute section. And once again, this time, unlike last week, the whistle is working. I tested it beforehand, so we have a whistle. I'm holding you guys to 2 minutes this time. No gaspers or anything else. We're just going to say, hey, you know what? 2 minutes is out. Bob, I'm going to start with you. This week's 2-minute question. The player facing the most pressure this season that is not named Jalen Hurts is go.
Jalen Carter. You got to stick with the Jalens because why are we going, Go ahead, take up some of my time.
We'll give you a timeout. We'll reset the play clock, too. There you go.
All right, timeout. Why are we going,
I was like, it's the Jalen thing. The Jalen thing. Yeah, that was it.
Okay. All right, time back in. Give me my ball. It's Jalen Carter because, who's more important to this defense? He's going to set the tone. He's the guy on that side of the ball more than anybody else has a chance to be a superstar, take his game to another level. I would say there's a handful of guys, maybe not even a handful, maybe only 3 in the NFL who can become the best interior defender in the league, replacing Aaron Donald of that title now that he's retired. And Jalen Carter is in that group, and I think he has the talent to do it, and he's so important to the Eagles defense. There's a ton of pressure on him. Everybody thought he was going to be great when they drafted him. Now is he doesn't get to 3 years. Now's the time for him to be great. Wow!
All right, nice. Yeah, you had a lot.
Under 2.
You love. Now, if this was Patrick Mahomes, you'd be a little scared that you left that much time left on the clock. No, sorry. Anywho,
well, since I got a few more minutes, this goes back to an old Saturday Night Live skit where George Bush, the senior, HW, gave this whole thing on Saturday Night Live. I think it was Dana Carvey played him. 1,000 points of light, stay the course. 1,000 points of light, and then they told him, "Well, you still got a minute and a half left, sir." He goes, "Again, I want to just say 1,000 points of light, stay the course, 1,000 points of light." Go ahead.
And look, you scored. There you go. And he still took a lot of time. Now he can't score. Good job. That was a good thing. Cayden, your 2 minutes is about to start. The player facing the most pressure this season, not named Jalen Hurts, is go.
Bryce Huff. I'll say that because you bring him in, you give him a pretty sizable contract for a guy that hasn't been more than a really good situational edge rusher. So he's been productive, but you're betting that he can replace Hassan Reddick's production. You're willing to get rid of him, and right now maybe it looks like the smart decision because of the whole Jets fiasco. But you still need Bryce Huff to replace his production, and we've seen Hassan Reddick be an elite pass rusher who can play 3 downs, and we haven't seen that from Bryce Huff. Reddick had 16 sacks in 2022, 11 sacks in 2023. There's no guarantee that Bryce Huff is going to be able to do that. Look, he had a career year last year on limited snaps, and he's efficient, and he had 10 sacks, but with a bigger workload, having to play against the run more. Does Bryce Huff wear out at some point this season? I think a lot of eyes are going to be on him. Can he play the run? Can he handle the snap count? And if he can't, and this Eagles pass rush, and we've talked about it already, how we're concerned about the depth, but it's fair to have questions about the top. Like, I like Josh Sweat. He's a pretty good player throughout his career, but he didn't play good at the end of last season. He's on the final year of his deal. I'm not sure, where his mindset is necessarily. Will he be in his most productive state? I'm not sure of that. And then you're betting on a guy that hasn't had this type of role before. And if he doesn't produce, this pass rush won't be good. So we can talk about all the secondary pieces that we want. We could talk about maybe a little bit of improved linebacker play. We could talk about Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. But if Bryce Huff is not getting after the quarterback, this Eagles defense is not going to be as good. And it's him. I mean, they gave him the money. They think he's this guy, and it's kind of been odd in preseason as he's been adjusting to this new role, playing in that Patriots game. Kind of Vic not, giving out a ton of love, and it doesn't seem like Vic is over. I was close.
you got it. You got the whistle. I was just waiting to see if I can actually it will work, and it did work. Yep. Unfortunately, you did go that one time out.
It was a good answer.
Very good answer.
It was a good answer. It was a long answer. It was the wrong answer. All right, go ahead.
Sorry, unfortunately, the clock got you there, but that was some very good points that were made in that. But that was good job, man. Good points. Now we've come to the final segment of today's show, and thank you guys for continuing to listen to this and continue to support us, listen to the podcast. It's the overtime section where we're going to ask pretty much I want to say off the wall, but try to make these guys think a little bit in terms of the answer. So among yesterday's cuts made around the league was Olympic wrestler Gable Stevenson, who the Buffalo Bills waived, and some of you may know him from WWE. Some of you may know that he's actually he competed in the Olympics. Now Stevenson was trying to become a defensive tackle. I'll start with you, Cayden. If you could take one athlete from any other sport and put them on the Eagles roster, who would it be, and what position would they play?
Gosh, this is a tough thing to think about. The whole this offseason, we saw the whole NBA, NFL debate. Can NBA guys play in the NFL, and NFL guys can play in the NBA? I don't think a lot of NBA guys can probably play in the NFL. Probably a very select few I feel like could translate. The one guy I would go with, thinking about it in terms of age as well, because if I wasn't thinking about age, maybe I'd say LeBron James, just based off like physicality and size and all that. But I'll go with Anthony Edwards from the Timberwolves. Just the way he high points the ball in basketball. I just see a world where maybe because of his athleticism, his ability to just leap high and grab rebounds and dunk on the basketball court, maybe that would translate to, tight end perhaps. I mean, he's 6'4", 225. I read somewhere that his first love was football before he ended up finding basketball, so he's got a little bit of a background there. I think you put him out there and he could be, a pretty solid tight end, in the NFL if he has some years of development. I don't know about his hands, but I mean, he's got good hands at basketball, so maybe it'll translate.
All right, that's deep dive. Nice, Bob. What athlete are you taking from another sport, and what position is he playing?
I'm going to the same sport, although I would argue that some of the worst things I've ever seen professional athletes do is watching athletes from any sport go try to take a batting practice at a baseball stadium. I've seen some really embarrassing ones over the years. Some decent ones, but for the most part, some very, very, very embarrassing ones that guys have hard. It's a skill that just doesn't translate to other sports because it's so hand-eye coordination. It's kind of like guys trying to go play golf. I've never played golf. But that's why there's superstars in the sports that are superstars in. But the one guy I would love, I'm going to keep it local. I would love to see on a football field as a slot wide receiver. Let's see if either one of you can guess who I'm going to say.
I'm going to say Noah Gray.
No. I'm going to say Tyrese Maxey.
Oh, wow. Okay, I got to hear this. Yeah, go for it.
Who goes forward faster than Tyrese Maxey? I mean, forward, and he can, I guarantee you, he can cut on a dime. The way he goes up and down a basketball court, he's just electrifying, and I could see that skill. Now, I don't know if he can catch a ball. He can catch a basketball. So you got to think he's got pretty good hands. I just think he would be a cover nightmare. He's a cover nightmare for everybody in the NBA, and I think he would be a coverage nightmare for any slot corner, any nickel corner in the NFL to try to line up against Tyrese Maxey. And I also don't think, this is a guy, NBA players are bigger than we think a lot of times. This is a guy who's not going to be knocked off the ball. I think he's got amazing toughness to him in addition to being lightning quick. I'd love to see it.
Not bad at all. See, I was thinking one of two things. I thought about, what? Do you go soccer? And I was thinking of even going women's soccer. Casey Murphy, the goalie, one of the goalies for Team USA, using her for say, like do a long a punt or maybe even like a field goal. And then I thought, maybe you have Joel Embiid line up at tight end. I was like, nah, I don't think that 7 foot. Like he has the size, but nah, I don't want to do that. So then I decided, all right, let me go off the beaten path. Do you guys know who Hamish Kerr is?
I do not.
Well, Hamish Kerr, he won the Olympic in high jump. And the reason why I'm putting Hamish Kerr there is he leaped 7 foot 6 inches. So I'm putting him on a 50-50 ball, and he's my 50 goal line specialist. I'm putting him on a 50-50 ball on the outside. Hope he leaps up higher than a cornerback at the high point. And then I know if he actually catches a ball, he can use the goalpost, jump over it like a high jump. He wouldn't touch it, so it wouldn't be a 15-yard penalty. And then there you go. You got your celebration. You got 6 points in. Everybody goes home happy and get to see that stuff. So, yeah, I'm taking that.
I actually did watch him win the Olympic high jump. He beat an American, right? They had a jump off.
Shelby McEwen. Yep, Shelby McEwen. That was fun to watch. That was a lot of fun.
7'6", that's a big jump.
Yeah.
That's high.
Pretty big. Well, I think we're going to end the show on that. Bob, Cayden, thank you very much for joining me again and being on here. And thank everyone for listening. You can once again make sure to look at NJ.com/Eagles and check that out. If you're in Lehigh Valley Live and now Penn Live, we're going to read our content on there as well.
We're everywhere. We're ubiquitous.
The NJ.com empire is expanding.
I knew sooner or later we'd become a bit ubiquitous. It was just a matter of time.
And you get extra points in Scrabble for that one. Good word.
2 P's and unstoppable, 2 G's and juggernaut.
Oh, my goodness. There you go. So, thank you guys very much for listening, and make sure to continue to read our stuff. We're going to have another day of practice, and the next week we got the real game starting up. So for Bob and Cayden, I'm Chris. Everybody have a good one. See ya.